Hello, Facebookers. It's Steve Barrett here. Again, we're ready for our weekly podcast, the PR Week. And it's finally become sunny in New York. We're all in a good mood. Even Frank Washkuch, our news director. How are you doing, Frank?
The weather is beautiful out there.
It is beautiful.
So it's a nice change of pace.
Can we bring up the beard again? Or I mean, our Facebook Livers have been following this with a lot of interest.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry about that.
It's very impressive, my friend.
Well, we're trying.
And more gravitas every week.
yeah. We'll see how long it lasts.
And we got Matt Davis with us from Dow. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Steve, it's a thrill to be here. Frank, I actually like the beard. I can't grow one, so I think it looks good on you. So.
Well, as you can probably tell, I can't really grow one either. So
I was going to say that.
I'm trying.
Every week it looks better, my friend. Great to be here, Steve and Frank.
Yeah, so we're going to chat to Matt and talk through a really busy week. Lots of interesting topics. So if you've got questions, comments, try and keep them nice and friendly. Let's not be snarky. And we will get going when I get the nod from Perry, the web editor, who's going to be part of the show as well this week. Hello and welcome to the PR Week, PR Week's regular weekly roundup of everything that matters in the worlds of PR and communications. My name's Steve Barrett. I'm the editor-in-chief of PR Week, and I'm going to guide you gently through a great show, actually. Got a really good show for you this week. We've got Matt Davis here, who's SVP of Global Public and Government Affairs. Matt, welcome to the show.
Good to see you, Steve. Great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on board. Interesting times at Dow, and you're going to talk through the journey of the last year and what's ahead in the next year, which not many communications professionals have been through, so we're really looking forward to finding out.
It's been kind of boring year, quite frankly.
Well, if you're bored by that, then you've got a low boredom threshold. And we got Frank Washkuch here. He's our news director. How are you doing, Frank?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on, as usual.
The show wouldn't be the same without you, Frank.
I don't want to take too much credit, but I appreciate it.
I'm just a humble servant to the Washkuch and the podcast. Busy week with the agency report.
It really has been. It's a terrific report. You should check it out on PRWeek.com.
It is.
Nice background colors this year, if I say so myself, and it looks terrific. So.
Well, you're all about the background colors, aren't you?
I am.
That's your thing. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Meltwater. It's acquired Sysomos. Ketchum has done a little revamp and they've gone to a one P&L structure. Interesting developments over there. And Perry Simpson, our web editor behind the dials, has had a fun week. He interviewed George Hamilton, who's having another stint as the Colonel at KFC. So we're going to talk to Perry a little bit about that. It was a fun time. So, and anything else that catches our attention over the next few minutes. But Matt, let's start with you. So Dow was involved in one of the biggest mergers ever, maybe even the biggest, with DuPont last year. And now you're in the process of divesting into 3 separate publicly quoted companies. And you're going to be heading off with the Dow company. So just talk us through the last sort of 12 to 18 months from a communications professional's point of view and how you've navigated that, how your team's navigated it, the issues that came up. It's a really unusual thing to happen in a short space of time. And
not only unusual, it's historic. And first of all, I didn't know I was going to have to compete against the Colonel today, so that's quite interesting.
He's the man. You know?
Yeah, if you look, Steve, over the last, let's say, 2 years at Dow, I've been with the company almost 32 years. And this pace of change that I've seen is unlike anything I saw the 30 years prior. So to your point, we're involved in one of the largest mergers in history. 2 of our fierce competitors, Dow and DuPont, have come together. We often make the analogy, whether it's fair or not, that we have decided to get married, but we're not going to stay together. We already want to get divorced on day one, and we're going to split up the assets and the children, and we're going to go our happy ways. So we're right into the merger state. Right now, we're probably toward the end cycle, if you will. By this time next year, we will divide into 3 separate companies. We'll have an ag company, a specialty company, and a material
Ag means agriculture.
That's right, agriculture sciences, and that's Corteva. They've already branded that. The specialty company will be called DuPont, and the material science company, that will be Dow, and that will be the company that I will remain with going forward.
And the other one is, sorry?
The other one is DuPont. would be the specialty company.
And the third one?
Corteva.
Corteva.
Yeah, that's the ag sciences
And
company.
will bits of both companies go into each of those three buckets, or otherwise there wouldn't have been much point in doing it?
Yeah, I mean, terrific question, because that was the rationale. Let's put all of our assets together. Let's look at it from a shareholder lens and decide where each one of those businesses best fits for long-term shareholder value. The easy one was the agricultural sciences. You take all of your ag sciences together, that creates the ag one. The more difficult one was the other two companies, specialty and materials, and deciding what should go into each bucket. So you're right, there'll be pieces of the old Dow and old DuPont in one bucket and the same in the other. So it's if it sounds complex, Steve, it's because it is. Yeah. And from a communications, public affairs, government affairs standpoint, not only is it complex, it's also thrilling and exciting, because you have to keep all of your stakeholders tremendously informed during this time, and then overlay on top of that all of the myriad geopolitical issues we're dealing with in the world. And it's created an interesting time for us.
Yeah, that was an interesting time to do that deal. You're not wrong there. There's another big deal going on at the moment, Bayer and Monsanto, which is a massive scale too. But that, well, as far as I know it, they're not then going to split down after that, although maybe they will have to.
Well, that's a good point. I don't quite know what Bayer and Monsanto will do. You also have Syngenta and China Chem also coming together. The interesting thing you learn through this process is the regulatory affairs in each geographic area are quite different, and you have to get them approved in Europe, in Latin America, in Asia, and then of course the grand prize, you have to get it approved in the United States, which tends to be the most problematic.
And that's become a little political.
A little?
Even more
okay.
political.
All right, yeah, okay, we'll go with a little, Steve, sure.
Talk us through that. So what's been the biggest challenges from your point of view?
Well, I think that the biggest challenges is making sure that each government understands why this is not only good for our people, for the shareholders, but what they're looking at is really the marketplace. And how is this going to impact consumers around the world? So I don't even know how many reams of paper in each government. You know, when you start with Brussels and you have to go down to Latin America, then you go to China. Each of the regions have their own different take of what consumers are going to look for in this. So it is a lot of lawyers involved, but a lot of communications and public relations people involved to make sure that we frame the messaging right. It is extremely, extremely complex. And because of the way each government acts differently, you have to tackle it each a different way.
Yeah, and then the other big part of communications, of course, is culture and internal. So
yes.
In a merger situation, that's often like top priority, isn't it? Making sure the cultures are merged and you come out with one better culture rather than two competing cultures. And we've seen with mergers in the past where they just haven't worked, they haven't melded together. So
I think I think that is the biggest issue. And if people who research and examine mergers where they tend to collapse is not the marketplace, it's that internal culture, as you're saying, Steve. And so you look at Dow and DuPont, we've been competing together in many ways in the marketplace, but in our industry, we're also competitors, we're suppliers with each other, we've been in business, so we know each other extremely well. But that's not to say we don't have our cultural differences that we're having to work through on a daily basis to really make this work.
It's not like Coke and Pepsi, though.
Not like Coke and Pepsi. No.
So from your team's point of view, what sort of things would you advise communications professionals in that situation, in a merger situation, to do to foster a positive culture moving forward?
Yeah, one thing you have to do is really slow down. I mean, the urgency to try to get this done, I get that. But you have to slow down, and one of the things most of the time people aren't really good at during this time is listen. Listen to every stakeholder group. Probably the most anxious during these type of mega mergers are your own people. So you have to understand what are their concerns, what are their excitements, and you have to over-explain. Because you have one group just speeding forward trying to get the deal done, and you're trying to bring everyone along to see how it's going to be good for them. Because if your employees, your own people, aren't excited about it, it's hard to let your customers be excited about it.
Yeah, that's a good point there, the first line of external communications,
Absolutely.
aren't they? But at the end of the day, human beings, they're worried about their job, they're worried about, am I going to have to up sticks and move somewhere, you know, what's going to happen to my team, am I going to be doing a different job, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the human things, I guess, that most people think about.
Well, and if you've been
first.
wearing one brand for 30-something years, as I mentioned, I've been with Dow almost 32 years wearing the Dow Diamond, and then all of a sudden I'm asked, well, go work over in a DuPont business, you use your Coke and Pepsi analogy. Can you imagine somebody at Coke all of a sudden wearing a Pepsi jacket or whatever? It's that kind of a mental, that book, Who Moved My Cheese? So you have to let people go through that change curve and listen and over-communicate and allow a little bit of anxiety and allow a little bit of pushback in order to get people to the space you need to ultimately go and be successful in whatever business they go to.
Yeah, and then the added element is then after that, you're then splitting up again.
Correct.
So what added element has that brought into it? People are wondering, well, which company am I going to go with? Again, the same sort of things, but with more piled on top after change.
Yeah, I think that's the chapter to still be written because it's not done yet. It's not the first time that we have spun off companies within Dow and people have moved to them. And for the most part, and I would say the vast majority, if you go back to them a year and a half later, and you ask the individual, and I've talked to a lot of people who've gone into different divisions, different businesses, they say that they're better off, that they enjoy it's kind of like a startup company. But I don't want to diminish at all the magnitude of change, and some people are having to relocate, and so you have to deal with all those issues as a communication. Then on top of that, you have to deal with the communities because we're based, in Midland, Michigan. You have DuPont in Wilmington, Delaware, and you have communities spread throughout the world where you have to communicate to those shareholders as well. So it's a real textbook in change management. And we're learning as we go along because, like you said, it's historic. Nobody's tried it before. So I'll come back and tell you how it went.
So when you get to that point, how does it work? Do you have to do 3 IPOs essentially?
It's not really an IPO because we have merged. It's
right.
basically standing up 3 separate companies.
Okay.
And they will become 3 separate distinct companies. But if you look at that, Frank, one of the other big complexities from a communication standpoint is IT, is information technology, because of the computer systems are intertwined.
Sure.
So you have to remove those. So there's a lot of work that goes into making sure you can stand up a separate business and then have them go ahead. And it's why nobody's tried this before. But I would have to report, so far so good. The teams are working great. We're right on schedule where we want to be, and I think people are starting to get their mind around what this is going to look like when it's done. I'm sure many books will be written about it.
On that topic, Matt, are you merging the IT functions of Dow and DuPont, or is there no point in completely merging them because then they're going to be going off again to be...
Yeah, there's no point in it completely. Same with purchasing. We haven't merged our communication. It's really we're working side by side, parallel, but to truly merge. When somebody's selected and which company they're going into, then they move into that at the appropriate time. But we're not, let's take my function, corporate affairs. We haven't merged all those together and then divided them out. We've kept them separate, but then decided where the talent would best fit over the 3 different companies.
And how's that going to phase into the 3 companies, or is that still TBD? Well, you obviously know where you're going. Does everyone else know where they're going? Are the DuPont comms team going off to the DuPont?
For the most part, I would say right now we're probably 85-90% done and telling. We call it talent selection. So again, for people in our profession, they know which one of the 3 businesses they're going to go into, or some have elected to go outside of the company to other roles. So for the most part, we've got our structure ready to go on day 1, which will be less than a year from now.
So when you land at the new company, Dow,
yes,
will you be at a smaller operation than you were previously?
From a sales standpoint, we will be. From a market standpoint, no. And because of the growth plans that we're on, we'll be bigger than what we were previously within less than 5 years. So it's exciting in the markets that we're going into, things like packaging, infrastructure, consumer goods, silicons. So these are growing markets, and so we're going to be taking the market by storm.
Yeah, it's a fascinating communications challenge, a great story, and thanks for telling us about that. We look forward to plotting how that goes. And,
excellent. I'll come back and give you an update periodically.
We'd love to hear that, actually. It would be really interesting. So let's get on to talking about some topical issues. We launched our agency business report, the biggest annual review of the agency business, the one-stop shop. It's all you need if you want to find out about PR agencies. And Frank, this year we made some changes. We presented it a different way, a little bit more digital first, digitally focused. In fact, it went online, more than a week before the print edition comes out. We're not a print-first thinking organization anymore. Some interesting findings. What were the top-line numbers or trends that really caught your eye?
Well, I would have to say was that last year was a bit of a sluggish year for most of the agency world. As you mentioned in your piece, they're pretty optimistic about having a good bounce back year, but last year was, by the standards of the last 10 years anyway, pretty slow.
Yeah, I think they had definitely three quarters were difficult. They saw some upside in Q4 2017, and then in Q1 18, but I think the mood was definitely cautiously optimistic rather than sort of gung-ho.
Right.
I think Richard Edelman, who runs the largest PR agency out there, they did something like 2.3% growth, something like that, 2.5.
Yeah, and this year we saw a lot of firms that were used to doing much more robust growth, coming in flat, coming in slightly negative, so a bit unusual in that respect.
Yeah, it was. Richard's looking to do double that this year, and he wasn't happy with 2.5, but I think other firms would have been. If you look at the overall market, the global PR agency market grew 4% to $11 billion. But in the US, it was lower. I think it was in the 2 to 3% range. In the 3 previous years, each of the 3 previous years, the US market grew 7% in each of those years. So that's significantly down. But that's not the full picture, because actually the top 50 and the holding company firms suffered most.
Yeah.
There were some great examples of mid-sized firms and smaller firms really doing well. If you look at people like Carmichael Lynch, Zeno, Olson, Engage, Padilla, some of these firms really did well and posted, double-digit growth. And there were some up-and-coming firms as well that we've focused on in the coverage, things like Steve Lippin's new firm, Covert Creative, who won the Cadillac business, and Trail Runner International, Jim Wilkinson's firm. So there's some interesting stuff going on. Matt, from your point of view, you used Teneo and Golin as your core agencies, I think. Right. What are you looking for? Because one of the things that we had a CEO summit of agency leaders, and there were about 19 leaders that we spoke to in a roundtable forum, and they found that CCO budgets were shrinking a little bit, at least the amount that was coming to them anyway. So what are you, and we've talked a lot about marketing budgets shrinking, and a lot of the big firms are going after that sort of business and money as well. From your point of view, how is the budget situation for communications? You mentioned how high profile it's been and that it's never been more important, and the C-suite understands that. But on the other hand, you're always under pressure to save money and cut costs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just literally came from a Communications 50 meeting where this became a huge topic. Every company there was saying that they're under resource-constrained environment. So I'm not surprised, Frank, in the way the survey has come out this year. But I'm also not surprised with the optimism, because everyone realized this is not sustainable, that as things grow, we're going to have to use a good balance of external and internal. So what we're looking for in an agency is somebody that can not just be a pair of hands or tactical. We need real strategic thinking. So we do use Teneo. We use Golin for more of our branding and advertising. We use Landor. So you've got to develop this long-term relationship in order for them to know your business almost as well as you know the business.
Yeah. One of the other trends was that we were seeing some of the content work and some of the influencer work. Brands were taking that in-house. They wanted more control over that. Is that something you're seeing as well? Well,
it's interesting because I see the pendulum goes back and forth, and I'm sure you've seen it, both you and Frank, that over the years people bring things in-house. One time we had graphics and photography in-house, and then we put all of that external, and sometimes branding comes. I don't think we will, in going forward, and we just talked about what Dow will look like, we won't be able to do everything we need to do in-house. So we will always need the right balance of agency support. Not only that, I think it's healthy for an organization the size of ours and other major companies to not get so insulated, that we do use that external perspective, and agencies provide that very well.
Yeah.
Now, how do you expect it to shake out when you become three separate companies? I mean, is one going to have more of a focus with consumer agencies, say, one going to be focused more on corporate, or are they all going to have a similar strategy?
Well, the easiest one is the agricultural company. They, of course, are going right into the farm industry, and there's a lot of agency support they use there. What DuPont does and what Dow does is to be determined. We'll probably continue to stay with the mix we have, at least initially, but then look at what we need to do as we go into different markets. So I do think eventually we'll have to do a complete agency review and just see what our mix is and see what we might be missing because we'll have to rebrand Dow. We'll have to let people know why we're different, how we're different as we spin out as the new company.
Is there one thing that you would advise agencies, that kind of frustrates you a little, that they don't get right all the time? What's the thing that, the squeaky wheel, if you like, what's the thing that they're not quite living up to?
This may sound a little bit more critical than what it's meant to be, Steve, but do your homework before you come in. I mean, really do the research on the company, and also don't become just like us. I mean, part of the reason we use external resources is to get that different thinking. I would rather, my dad used to say, if two partners always agree, one of them's not necessary. So I want the agency in the room to say, I don't think that's the right way to go, and let's talk through it, rather than just, whatever you say, go do. We can buy that elsewhere. You want somebody to come in and push you a little bit to think differently, especially in today's geopolitical environment. We need them to look around 2, 3, 4 corners for us and come back and say, this is what's coming your way, be prepared.
And do you think culturally, I think an advertising agency culturally was much more used to doing that. They would give you a proposal, and if you pushed back, they'd say, well, take it or leave it. Whereas a PR firm might go away and give you something else. Do you think culturally PR firms need to be a bit more bold and stand up for their
Yes,
their
maybe
thinking?
not quite to the take it or leave it, Steve, but maybe a little bit more emphatic on their opinion and advice, but back it up with data. The reason why we've been using Teneo is they have very vast experience, and they've seen a lot of these scenarios that we haven't seen. They've dealt with some of the issues that we're now dealing with other organizations. So they're able to say, we've seen this work, this hasn't worked, this might work in your situation. So I do think maybe PR agencies need to be a bit bolder in their advice. Not in a take it or leave it, but how about option B, option C, option D, rather than just come in with option A?
Yeah, no, interesting stuff. Frank, one other big news story this week in the agency sector was Ketchum. They've done a sort of not a revamp, but they've moved some of the deck chairs around, and they've moved to one P&L.
Yes, that's right.
And this is the first part of some other changes. What's the story there, and what do you think's driving it?
Well, that's the top line of it right there, is that Ketchum is going to be under one P&L as part of changes that they're rolling out over the next couple of months. That is going to result in changes to the job descriptions of office leaders, managing directors, things like that. They're going to be doing things a little bit differently as well. Ketchum is going to make more formal announcements in the weeks to come, and we'll see what else they have to say then.
What's the driving factor in that? I had not heard that. Did they come out with, here's why we're going to one P&L?
Well, we had to confirm this one on background, so we didn't get a full explanation from them. But they're not the first agency to do that in the past couple of years. There was the Ogilvy reorganization. Hill & Knowlton did something similar a couple of years ago. Yeah, Publicis, yeah.
I mean, I was going to ask you, Matt, if you have regional-based P&Ls or discipline-based, people get protective, they're rewarded on their office or their discipline, whereas the idea of a one P&L is that you put the best people on the business wherever they are in the organisation. And there's two sides to the argument. Some people say in the latter argument that people can hide, because the focus isn't on their specific office or discipline. Is that something you've come across in your 30 years in sort of using agencies?
Yes, I can see both sides of the coin. And if you look at a corporation, we've gone to looking regionally. And one of my other roles is I'm president of Dow North America. So I have a scorecard for North America, for Canada and the U.S. But when it comes to how we reward at the end of the year for things like bonuses, we have a company all in. So I'm wondering if maybe agencies say, okay, you're still going to be accountable for the customers that you're dealing with and making sure that that line is profitable. But we're going to have one P&L for the way we reward the organization. So it's kind of a rallying cry. I don't know. But yes, we do that, but we also have specific business P&Ls that they have to. It's the only way we can tell who's really punching above their weight.
I'm sure even if it's unofficial, they'll still be doing
Well, that's
something.
true.
Yeah, interesting stuff. We look forward to, finding out the other changes that they didn't want us to know about.
We'll be keeping an eye on it.
Let's talk a little bit about vendors and products and tools and that part of the PR world.
Yeah.
Maybe, sometimes people think it's a bit dull, but actually, whenever we do stories on this, it gets a lot of traffic, doesn't it? So,
It really does,
Meltwater, there's been a lot of consolidation in the sector. Meltwater has acquired Sysomos, hasn't it? So what's going on there?
So they're both social analytics companies, and Meltwater has agreed to buy Sysomos, and it's going to fold the company in and make them part of their social analytics division. So, with all of the acquisitions we've seen by not just Meltwater, by Cision in the past couple of years, I mean, it's more consolidation in that space.
Yeah, and I think Sysomos used to be part of MarketWired, didn't it?
Right.
They acquired them and then divested them, and then MarketWired became part of NASDAQ, and then it was sold. Then there's BusinessWire in the space. Cision has done a very high-profile job of really rolling up a bunch of different disciplines and trying to do a sort of Salesforce or Oracle-style one-stop shop products and services. Matt, are these products still relevant? Are these companies relevant enough these days? And is the idea of consolidating and giving you more of a one-stop shop attractive, or do you actually want to pick the best of each?
Well, strange answer, yes and no. It really depends on what we're trying to move. Things like trade shows and social media, one-stop shop does help. I also think some agencies shouldn't hesitate by doing pull-through vendors, meaning bring the vendors with you to the table. That doesn't mean we're going to hopscotch over the agency and go right to the vendor in all cases. So if you want to formulate a team that's going to have more power, I don't mind you bringing your vendors to the table and get exposure to us. But some of these cases where we've tried, especially in the social media area, to do a one-stop shop has not worked, mainly because we try to go global and it unravels when you go into certain regions. So it's not really the case that you can do that.
Frank, actually, Cision put a release out this. We've been saying the press release is dead for years, haven't we?
Yeah.
And they put a release out saying
Well, there's a caveat to that, though.
They put a press release out saying it's not dead. A new survey finds that press release company does new survey that says press releases aren't dead.
No, the caveat to that, though, is that it has to be a focused, good press release with a clear angle. Which, sadly, when you get as many of them as I do... Some people
might say that was pretty much, 1.0.
When you get as many of them as I do a day, you see a lot of them that aren't. So,
you love getting all those press releases, don't you, Frank?
No, I do.
What about singing telegrams? Should we bring that back? I mean, everything old is new again. That might be,
Pigeons,
that would work.
But on the platform space, there's actually more news about that today, and that Signal Labs has reached an agreement to provide their clients with data that they've collected from Reddit, which is a bit dangerous. But you could imagine for a company it's really interesting to be able to see what people are saying about them on Reddit, too.
It's an interesting space, actually, and we've been covering
it's a very loud
lot,
space.
and we will continue to, for sure. Let's come to the big story of the week, shall we? It's Perry Simpson, the webmaster behind the Dials, who's been hanging out with celebrities again. He does that on the weekends, not usually in the week. But, yes, it's George Hamilton, the new colonel. Well, he's been the colonel before, but he's now having another stint. Perry, talk us through it, because you were hanging out with George Hamilton, someone you weren't as familiar with as, maybe some of us older gentlemen, or shall we say, and Dynasty and all that good stuff. Talk us through it. What was the video all about?
Okay, so KFC has brought George Hamilton back on to be their extra crispy colonel, which I think he did in 2016, I want to say. And I wasn't familiar with him or his work prior to meeting him the day of. But a very cool guy, very interesting dude. I actually love talking to him. Really down-to-earth fellow. He is very tan, indeed.
He is.
And that was the first question that Diana Bradley, our senior reporter, I think she has a new role now, but
she's the associate news editor.
Yes.
Hopefully she's not listening and she won't know you've downgraded her.
Sorry, She fed me a couple questions, and one of them was about his tan. And yeah, so I did a video. It was pretty fast and dirty. And KFC had this cool press thing set up where there was these models and robes and a swimming pool and chicken-scented things.
The big question is, Perry, did you manage to get some KFC-flavoured suntan lotion?
I took a pass on that. I think they might have had some on deck. I said I'm okay. They had some bourbon, which apparently was really good. But I
chicken-flavoured bourbon?
I don't know if it was chicken-flavored. Right. I wasn't really interested in
but that could be a new product extension. Yeah.
Sure. No, but it was great. The videos came out pretty good. Interesting stuff. Really cool ad as well.
Yeah, so check it out. It's on PRWeek.com. Yeah. It's another great video by Perry. So thank you, mate.
Yep.
Good work.
So how old is George Hamilton now?
Well, he must be 78.
Oh my gosh. 78. Oh my gosh. No wonder you didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
No, he's looking pretty good on it, actually.
Yeah.
But Matt, who's going to be the next Colonel? I mean,
well, I think
I can't help noticing.
Well,
the podcast listeners can't quite get the value of this, but the Facebook Live listeners, I could see you being the Colonel. What do you think?
Well, Steve, I'm a bit disappointed because I was told I was supposed to get it before Reba.
Yeah.
And now I hear I got punked by George Hamilton. So stay tuned. I mean, my agent's going to work on that and see what I can do. I don't know if I'd be called extra crisp, maybe spicy chicken.
Extra spicy, I think.
Yeah. What's my stage
Neither
name?
of you quite have the accent for it, though, is the issue.
Well, can you do the Colonel?
No, I certainly can't.
Oh. I thought maybe that's why you're growing up the beard.
I couldn't even try.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure the suit would look quite right on there.
Got to the bottom of
next time I'll wear the white suit. Let's see how it goes.
All right, listen, Matt, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us on the show today. Thank you, Frank. Just before we go, don't forget our Brand Film Festival. Very excited about that. Next week at the Paley Media Centre on May the 3rd. It's going to be the big gala screening, and in the afternoon we have some workshops with some great talent, brands, talking about the intricacies of putting a good brand film together. So do snag a ticket for that before they sell out. We've got our Global Awards in London on May the 15th. That's going to be a great show as well, celebrating the best in global multi-regional work as well as some of the best regional work too. That's going to be fun. 40 Under 40, it's one of the most popular things we do. Are you still qualified for that, Matt?
Just barely missed it this year, right. Steve, but 41.
Me too.
Yeah, you too. Okay.
But 40 Under 40, the final deadline is May the 2nd, and so do get your best talent submitted into that process. It's a fantastic program and a great celebration in October. And finally, our PR Week conference. We're going on the road. We're going to Chicago. It's on October the 15th. Some great themes. We're going to interact with a lot of the great companies up in Chicago, especially in the food and beverage space, but lots of other spaces too. We're in the merchandise mart, and we're really looking forward to it. And I think Chicago's starting to get very excited. So looking forward to that. But that's all we got time for, I'm afraid. We will see you next time on the PR Week.